Hello, today we are going to do our intro to probability. We're going to look at some basic probability and a bunch of vocabulary. So our first vocab word is an experiment. An experiment is a situation involving chance or a probability that leads to results called outcomes. So an example of an experiment could be flipping a coin. It could be spinning a wheel. It could be picking a marble out of a bag. Picking a marble. Rolling a die. Those are a bunch of ones that we're going to do a lot, etc. So more options than just that. But an experiment is doing something. Flipping that coin, spinning a wheel, picking a marble out of a bag, rolling a die. An outcome, so our second vocab word, is the result of a single trial of that experiment. So for example, if we're flipping a coin, an outcome could be heads, an outcome could be tails. Those are two different outcomes that could occur from that experiment. Spinning a wheel, let's say it's a color wheel, so an outcome could be red or blue or green or yellow, or whatever colors are on there. If we're picking a marble, we could be picking a blue marble or a green marble or a yellow marble. If we're rolling a die, we could get a 5, we could get a 1, etc. So outcomes are the results of a single trial from the experiment. An event, so this one gets a little bit trickier. An event is one or more outcomes of an experiment. So we're looking to choosing a king from a deck of cards. So that's the event that we're looking for. It could be one or more outcomes. So the event could be choosing a king and then choosing a queen. It could be rolling a 1 and rolling a 2, rolling an even number. So an event is something that we're looking for from the experiment involving one of those outcomes. The sample space of an experiment is the set of all possible outcomes. So for example, the sample space of flipping a coin would be heads and tails. Those are the only two outcomes possible. Those are all of them. Spinning the wheel would be red, blue, green, yellow, whatever colors are on that wheel. If I'm rolling a die, the sample space, if we know, a dice has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now there are other dice out there that have more sides, but a standard 6-sided die, those are all of the possible outcomes. So a sample space of an experiment is the set of all possible outcomes. Now we will get trickier because if the event is choosing 2 cards from a deck, so it's not just all of the cards, it would be picking an ace and then a king, an ace and then a queen, and then all of the different possible, that would be a huge sample space there. So the probability is the measure of how likely an event is. So let's go with our first example that we gave, flipping a coin. It is a heads or a tails option. So there is one outcome out of 2 possible. So the probability is 1/2, which is also 0.5. When we are creating the probability, what we want to remember about the probability is that it is the number of successful outcomes. So how many ways can you be successful over the total number of outcomes? And this is that sample space that you're choosing from. So successes over total. So our first example here, what is the probability of each outcome when a quarter is tossed 2 times. So we briefly touched on this a couple seconds ago. Sample space. If I'm flipping a coin, we know it's either heads or tails. But I'm going to be flipping it 2 times. So I could have heads the first time and then tails. Or I could have tails and then heads. Or I could have tails and then tails. Or heads and then heads. That's the only combination that you could have there. So if you're flipping a coin, there are 4 different ways to flip a coin 2 times. So we're going to get into theoretical probability versus the difference between experimental and theoretical. So let's say I want to find the probability of flipping the coin and getting tails and then heads. If I look through here, there was only one way that could happen. So successes over total. There are 4 different possible flips of 2 coins. So that is 1 out of 4, which is a 0.25 probability. If I wanted the probability of tails and then tails, looking, there's only one way that happened. There are 4 possible, giving me a 0.25. So theoretical is all about what should happen. Experimental is toss a coin and find out what actually happens. So theoretical is what should, experimental is what could. All right, so you actually have an app on your calculator that we're going to look at this. So we want to go ahead and roll, and I got a heads. And then I go again, and I get a tails. So my first one is I got heads and then tails. Let's do that again. I got heads and then tails. Interesting. Heads and then tails. Heads and then tails. This is not right. Let's do this again. So we got heads and then tails, and then we just went again and we saw that we got tails and then heads. Tails and then heads. So if we look at what should have happened from our sample space, heads and then tails should have only come up 1 out of the 4 times. But look at this. Heads, tails came out 3 out of the 4 times. So theoretical, again, is what should happen. Experimental is what actually does happen when you perform the experiment. Now, the larger the sample space, so the more times you do it, the closer to the theoretical it's going to become. So the next one is what is the probability of each outcome when a single 6-sided die is rolled. So the sample space for this is if you have a 6-sided die, you can roll a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, and a 6. So if I wanted the probability that I roll a 2, if I look through here, that is a 1 out of a 6 chance. 0.17. So it could be a fraction, it could be a decimal. Now if we switch it up a little bit, what if I did the probability of an even number? 2, 4, 6. So there are 3 different ways to be successful there. And there's still 6 total outcomes. So the probability of rolling an even number is 1/2 or 0.5. What if we said, what's the probability of rolling a number less than 5? We want to be careful here because it doesn't say less than or equal to, it just says less than. So that would be 1, 2, 3, and 4. Those are all the numbers that are less than 5. There are 4 ways to be successful out of the 6 total. So we've got 2/3, which is about 0.67 for that probability. All right, so theoretically, that's what should happen. Now we're going to do experimental. So we're going to roll the dice 6 times. Back on our calculator, there's the rolling the dice. So I'm going to roll. I get a 2. And then a 5. So I got a 2 and then a 5. And then we've got a 6 and then a 2, 6, then 2, and then a 3, and then a 1. All right, so again, theoretically, we know what should have happened, but if I look here, I rolled a 2. Theoretically, look at that. We actually did that practice one. Theoretically, it should have only come up 1 out of the 6 times, but in actuality, it came up 2 out of the 6 times, and we found an experimental probability of 1/3. So again, theoretical, what should happen, experimental, what actually does happen when you do the experiment. All right, that is it for our intro to probability. Hopefully it wasn't too new for you, but we are all done.